Welcome to RELS 357W, the end of the world. And now we're talking about transhumanism, AI, and the singularity. And so let's begin with some definitions. First of all, transhumanism, which also has the symbol of H+, can be defined as an international cultural and intellectual movement that has an eventual goal of fundamentally transforming the human condition by developing and making widely available technologies that enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. So the organization Humanity Plus advocates, as one of the leading organizations for transhumanism, advocates the ethical use of emerging technologies to enhance human capacities. In other words, as they say on their website, we want people to be better than well. This is the goal of transhumanism. And this might be worthwhile just going back a little bit. Transhumanism actually was coined as a term in 1967 by Julian Huxley. He was referring to the belief that the creation, development, and use of technologies will improve, as we've talked about, all these various capacities: physical, intellectual, and psychological. The Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom goes further at defining transhumanism. Transhumanism promotes an interdisciplinary approach to understanding and evaluating the opportunities for enhancing the human condition and the human organism. It's opened up by the advancement of technology. Attention is given to both present technologies like genetic engineering and information technologies and anticipated future ones such as molecular nanotechnology and artificial intelligence. Now, in some ways, this gets connected with evolutionary thought, where instead of having nature develop us, particularly as human beings, but really to develop capacities through natural processes, through natural selection, it allows us to do this through our own technological work as human beings. And it might be, in some ways, an extension of evolution in a certain way. All right, then what is artificial intelligence? Here's a quick and dirty definition. Quote, colloquially, the term artificial intelligence is applied when a machine mimics cognitive functions that humans associate with other human minds, such as learning and problem solving. This comes, by the way, from the website you can see, ocf.berkeley.edu. So often there are two forms of AI or artificial intelligence that are distinguished. First, a strong AI, which is the goal to develop artificial intelligence to the point where the machine's intellectual capability is functionally equivalent to humans. And then secondly, weak or narrow AI, focused on one specific or narrow task. And here you could think of Siri on the iPhone, which is also not always, at least if it's in my experience, that reliable, or I should say entirely reliable. So the question we want to be asking, especially as we think about the end of the world as a theme, is what does AI say about our uniqueness as human beings, and particularly our future? Since right now, I don't think it's too debatable to say that human beings have reached the pinnacle of evolution for species and for the for our globe. But what is our future then? What is the future that we have and the future of the world? Here I want to take a little bit of a sidebar, because instead of looking particularly at religion, we're looking a little bit more at materialism or naturalism. I do want to put out there that there are certainly religious, Christian, Mormon, and other religious traditions, Protestant, Catholic, etc., transhumanists, but often transhumanism is connected with a certain kind of materialism, and that is the teaching that nothing exists except matter and its movements and modifications. So that's generally the term for materialism. Naturalism is a really connected term, which is the belief that everything arises from natural properties and causes, and supernatural or spiritual explanations are excluded or discounted. Sometimes it's wrapped up with this idea of humanism, an outlook or system of thought attaching primary importance to human rather than divine or supernatural concerns. But we have to understand that humanism really began, at least in the modern period, as a Christian movement in the Renaissance around, let's just say, the 16th century. So really, secular humanism, meaning non-transcendent, non-religious humanism, is perhaps more accurate. Then I've got a couple notes here on atheism and anti-theism. Atheism is generally the belief that there is no God or gods. Anti-theism has been distinguished from that, that there's an active denial that there are no God or gods. So it's more of a evangelistic, you might say, approach to atheism. And I have a meme for you by Godbusters. Philosophy questions that may never be answered. Religion answers that may never be questioned. And just to point out that in our growing world of non-religiously affiliating, or the nuns, who check the box none of the above when asked, what religion are you? That in a growing world of nuns, where about 40% of 18 to 30-year-olds would say they are not religiously affiliating, atheism is only about 3.14% perhaps of our population. And even among the religiously unaffiliated or nuns, atheists make up 13.6%. So most people, even if they don't religiously affiliate, are still not atheists. But in this world of transhumanism, you often get a very materialistic, naturalistic, or humanistic perspective. All right, I'm going to move to Ray Kurzweil just for a minute. There's some videos that you'll be watching of his, one of the leading thinkers in transhumanism, and his idea of the singularity. Not only his idea, but he promotes it. Born in 1948, educated at MIT, he's the director of engineering at Google, and he's invented things. He's had inventions like optical character recognition, text-to-speech, electronic keyboards. If you look at almost any stage today, you'll see on the keyboard, at least one of them will be a Kurzweil keyboard. He believes that humankind will achieve a singularity, a form of transcendence through the material world in the advancement of knowledge around 2040, where computer learning and human intelligence, or computers' intelligence and human intelligence, will merge in a kind of seamless connection, a singularity, which he pulls as a term from physics, these unrepeatable events, you might say, or these events that have a particular singular significance, might be a better way to say it. He says it this way, quote, "The singularity is the hypothesis that accelerating progress in technologies will cause a runaway effect where an AI will exceed human intellectual capacity, radically changing human civilization." In a 2017 Futurism articles, Kurzweil said this, quote, "2029 is the consistent date I've predicted for when an AI will pass a valid Turing test and therefore achieve human levels of intelligence." And again, as I said before, back to Kurzweil, I have set the date 2045 for the singularity, which is when we will multiply our effective intelligence a billionfold by merging with the intelligence we have created. So what is the Turing test? This is a key part of the movie Ex Machina, and other particular movies and conferences and so on. The Turing test was developed by the mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing. Lived from 1912 until 1954. It was a test of a machine's ability to exhibit intelligent human-like behavior indistinguishable from that of a human. Turing proposed that a human evaluator would evaluate natural language conversation between a human and a machine designed to generate human-like responses. The evaluator would be aware that one of the two partners in conversation would be a machine, and the participants would be separated from one another. Commonly, this is understood to be in two rooms in which they cannot, the human being cannot see the machine. The conversation would be limited to a text-only channel, such as a computer keyboard and screen, so the result would not depend on the machine's ability to render words as speech. Now, if the evaluator cannot confidently tell the machine from the human, the machine is said to have passed the test, or the Turing test. The test results do not depend on a machine's ability to give correct answers to questions, only how closely it resembles those a human would give. Now, this test was introduced by Turing in a famous 1950 paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence. He opens with these words: I propose to consider a question. Can machines think? Because thinking is difficult to define, Turing chose to, quote, replace the question by another, which is closely related and is expressed in relatively unambiguous terms. Turing's new question is this: are there imaginable digital computers which would do well in the imitation game? End of quote. And of course, there's a movie about Turing and called The Imitation Game, about his life and about his work in decoding the Nazi intelligence, which helped end World War II. That's The Imitation Game that's referred to in the movie, but also in the Turing test. Turing believed that one could actually answer this question, and he argued against all the major objections to the proposition that machines can think. 1950, 70 years ago, Turing asked this question. It's amazing how Alan Turing's paper is now becoming something that many of us, or many thinkers, think is true. So just some final thoughts. And here's the connection with our class particularly. As opposed to a religious vision of an end to the world by a transcendent power or God, now we have a technological force that brings about the end of humanity and perhaps the world as we know it. Some, like Ray Kurzweil, Nick Bostrom, Peter Thiel, are largely enthusiastic about the opportunities through AI and transhumanism, and particularly when they're optimistic about transcending the limitations of human life and becoming perhaps immortal and or fusing our intelligence with that of machines. And those of us who, like almost everybody, at least that I run into, who uses a cell phone to Google an answer, has already become, in a way, connected to a machine that extends our intelligence in a new way. Now, there are others, and this is often depicted in the movies, like The Terminator, Ex Machina, and The Matrix, present a more concerning and frightening vision in which these machines take us as human beings, take over our lives as human beings, and seek to destroy us or perhaps harvest us only as slaves to their power and their takeover. So what is your opinion? What is your take on this? That's what we're looking at in these 2 weeks as we wrap up this class on the end of the world.